So let's move on to talk about, we've got this sort of information together, we're trying to gather it together, understand it. What's often a key problem is very strong beliefs that the person has which are in some way affecting their lives, and which essentially other people don't agree with, and that they're running into conflict with that. And these strong beliefs need first to be understood, and understood in the context. So with this guy here, as long as there's nothing wrong with me, I'll be getting back to Jupiter. I mean, we'd be very interested in why Jupiter. You know, why is it that this particular guy wants to get back to Jupiter? Now, it might be that Jupiter is a village outside Southampton. I mean, Canada's a village outside Southampton, so you know, maybe there's one called Jupiter. So it may be there's a very straightforward reason for what at first seems quite strange. Or it may be that there's another belief that's associated with this. He may be one of the apparently many million people who believe that they've been abducted by aliens, and actually, you know, they come from... And then there may be some other belief which, not particularly interfering with their life, which is unusual, which is strange, but which is not particularly problematic. Or it may be something that's seriously affecting his life. And that we want to know more about it. When did he first come? You know, when he first think about Jupiter? When has this become an issue to him? And understand it better. Understand how it all started. Understand what the period in his life was before he began to run into these concerns. Look at what was happening in terms of his life at the time. Sometimes there's very little. And sometimes actually there aren't very key issues that have gone on. But the person's gone through a period where there may have been relatively minor changes. You know, I had one lad who basically changed from working on the day shift to the night shift. And that disrupted his sleep quite a lot. And that very clearly was the trigger that actually led to a lot of other difficulties he had. And a lot of beliefs and concerns that came in at that time. So sometimes it's not anything very major, but something which triggers difficulties in the context of perhaps being a bit vulnerable to stress generally. Sometimes it's that they get feelings, physical feelings, which are difficult to understand. So you can get tingling in your fingers, for example, and I've certainly had one or two people who thought that that might be electricity. You know, what else causes tingling in your fingers? You know, maybe I'm being electrocuted. And the belief that perhaps that was because of the neighbours, because they'd had a row with the neighbours. So the neighbours are electrocuting me, was the sort of assumption that the guy had come to. And we were able to talk a little bit about what else causes tingling. And if you overbreathe, and if you're overbreathe now, what you'd find is your fingers tingle. That's just one of the common things that happens. And he'd been a bit stressed and misinterpreted particular feelings that he was getting. Sometimes people have thoughts that worry them a great deal. If you're a bit depressed, I mean, perhaps with the baby blues, we've had women who sometimes get thoughts which worry them, you know, about harming themselves or other people. And they think they must be terrible to think that sort of thing. And we've seen at least one or two people who that's actually turned into a voice. It seemed like a voice was saying, it can't be me, it must be somebody else saying that. And so being able to understand what these early issues are, what these perceptions, beliefs are, and how we can work with them is very important. And being able to help people look at perhaps other alternative explanations. Looking at the content, looking at what it is about the delusion, what it is about the belief that's important. Look at the reasons for it. You know, why did you believe it? Before we try to sort of, in any way, debate it. Then it might be worth looking at other possibilities. Sometimes a person will put themselves in another person's shoes. That's difficult sometimes, but they may be able to sort of look at how other people respond if something like this was said. We'll help them then look at following up and finding information about their beliefs. So, you know, maybe the person believes that it's something to do with satellites, that it's satellites that actually are having an effect on my mind. Or we've had other patients who've talked about something in my brain that's been put in my brain that's causing me to have headaches or some other sort of cause. So let's find out about that. Let's find out about satellites. Let's find out how these things happen. And what we sometimes find is that tracking it back, it's been a documentary or a film or something like that, which has been either misunderstood, or the film's actually said that, but it's been fictional, and the person's taking it in a literal sense. So there's often a route to go back to actually understand where it's come from. And this sort of reality testing reasoning can be really helpful in establishing quite a good relationship with the person, helping them sometimes understand the beliefs a little bit, sometimes begin to sow doubts as well. But when people have had beliefs which have been strong for a long time, you don't expect those to suddenly turn over. You know, it does take time sometimes for things to shift. And sometimes they can be quite resistant, and you can feel you going around in circles. So there are various routes then that it's possible for us to use using these sort of approaches, which involve agreeing to differ. You know, that, okay, we understand exactly why you believe that. Don't quite agree with it. I mean, the conclusions you've come to are not the ones that we might have. But let's try and understand why you believe it and where this has come from. And sometimes there are other issues which emerge. And once you reach this sort of point with somebody, they'll start to talk about other key issues that may be around. One person whose mother had had quite a lot of illness in her past, who became very worried about developing similar sorts of problems. Another person who actually has things about relationships that were important. Another who just felt very negative about himself. Another person who felt they weren't being respected properly. And these sort of beliefs can then emerge, and there are various ways that we help to sort of draw them out. What you quite often find is that though the belief may still remain, you know, whatever that belief is, that I've come from Jupiter or whatever else, the behaviour begins to change, and they begin to start to interact and not act on the belief in quite the same way. And there are a variety of different ways that we can work with people in these circumstances, which allow us to begin to sort of draw out some of these issues, which can be helpful where beliefs seem quite fixed.